Hello everyone, this is Hadrian.
And I'm Mal.
And today we're kicking off a brand new co-op campaign in Early Access 5 of Master of Orion. We're going to be playing on the all-new Extreme difficulty and releasing episodes from our individual perspectives daily at 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on our channels. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. And just to sort of set the landscape for folks, we're actually not going to get into actual gameplay, but we are going to talk about it. This is going to serve really two purposes. One, we're going to talk about the Phase 5 changes. It just came out this week, and for point of reference, I think that was June 24th, Hadrian? Correct me if I'm wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
It was indeed.
Of 2016, so if you're from the future. And then we're going to talk about Phase 5 and the impact, because there was a lot of changes to the meta. I think you would agree with that, right?
Oh yeah, lots of changes. The patch notes are massive.
So we'll talk about that a bit, and then we'll talk about the settings that we're going to do for this co-op campaign. And Hadrian already mentioned one that we're going to be playing on that new extreme difficulty. Now we've already done a test where Mal screwed up the audio dry run, so we kind of already know what we're doing, sort of. And we both have experience with Phase 5, so we're going to give you the rationale behind what we're doing, what we're doing in this campaign with regards to our setup. So H,
exactly.
What do you think the biggest, for you, now that you've had some hands-on time with Phase 5, what was the biggest impact change to you in terms of like the first 50 turns of play? Like what changed in terms of your priority and why?
What happened with that is I went into it very much expecting the AI to be improved and to be much more aggressive. And that's exactly what happened. And I remember saying at the time, like, this is going to be what what will impress me the most and what will, probably affect my gameplay the most. And I think that ended up being the case. I think that in terms of Early Access 5, especially compared to Early Access 4, and especially compared to Early Access 3, the AI is just much more aggressive, especially on extreme difficulty. They're really in your face, and it provides almost too much of a challenge. I don't mean that in a bad way necessarily, but it's just almost unrealistic the extent to which they charge us. But it was interesting, and it definitely kept us on our toes. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the most significant changes. I would say that the AI aggressiveness on any difficulty, but particularly on extreme, and I use the term that they immediately come and try to eat your face off. I think the other really big change in Phase 5 is the way the emphasis has been put back on the different biomes and related to growth and how unbelievably, matter of fact, I don't think until you actually started playing it that you were like, Mal said it was slower growth now for new pop, but after experiencing it, I mean, it is slow, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that actually gives us a good opportunity to mention another one of our settings for the campaign, which is that we are going to be playing on fast population growth and slow research, just to kind of counterbalance that fast population growth. But it's for the purpose of this Let's Play to make sure that things move at a decent rate, because the growth rate has changed, especially on planets that don't already have vegetation on them. So if it's anything less than, say, if it's a barren world, essentially, or especially a radiated or a toxic world, it takes forever compared to previous patches to get that second population.
And if you can't, I think it's important to note, too, that the colony base used to provide some food, so at least your first pop there wouldn't die. But now...
Not anymore.
You go there, even if you go to a planet with a good biome, you're stuck on food production, that one pop that you have. And so that changes the dynamic, particularly in the first 50 turns, because, I used to go look for, if I found a barren world that was ultra rich, I would take it for sure early on, no problem, because I can overcome the fact that it doesn't have a great biome with technology pretty quickly, and I would do that without even a second thought. Now, I'll ignore the ultra rich planet, and I'll take like the medium, abundant, arid world or ocean world happily. Because of the way that growth works now. It also means that text that people, I don't think, used a whole lot. I always have, but I think people have largely sort of ignored their use, and I think it's going to be very important going forward, is the use of civil transports.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that you mentioned to me is that, you have had the practice of establishing a particular planet or two, or even a system, the express purpose of which is just to crank out civil transports so it can feed the population of other planets and speed up your growth rate collectively, which being honest, is a strategy I have never pursued. but
especially
given these changes.
But you see the value of it now, even based on the other amount of time we've spent together in Phase 5, right?
Yeah, good lord. I mean, it's so evident so quickly.
You know, in terms
I think
in terms of new tech too, we've got advanced colony ships, but I mean, we played quite a bit in our test run, and which Hadrian is kind enough to label it that.
You're throwing yourself under the bus at this point.
That's fine.
Nice,
that's boop, just backing up. Back it up. I'll take it, Hadrian. I'll take it.
Exactly.
But the advanced colony ship, which is new in Phase 5, actually does give some food. It actually gives basically all of the sort of baseline things that you would need for a colony, like a hydroponic farm, and what else does it give? Like marine barracks, and I think automated factory, something like that. So it's really good. But we didn't even get to advanced colony ships.
No.
I mean,
so that's still going to be a new thing for me. As I mentioned at the beginning actually, I don't think I mentioned it in this introduction yet. I mentioned it before. That is one aspect of Early Access 5 that I actually haven't messed with at all. I haven't played. Since we didn't get to it, and I haven't played with Early Access 5 apart from what I've done with you. There are still some elements here that are new to me, so I think our different perspectives are going to be valuable for people watching this series as well, because you've had a little bit more hands-on time. You got to jump on it when it came out and really, really sink your teeth in, whereas I was still focused on finishing up another series and some other stuff outside of the channel. So that's going to be one of the added value points for having the campaign visible from both of our channels, from both of our perspectives, so that people can kind of see, how the approach is different, given our slightly different experience levels with this. What were some of the other things that we talked about with the changes? I think one of the other big ones that we're not going to see as much, but I think is worth bringing up in discussing Early Access 5, is there have been some changes to tactical combat, particularly the space monsters have been given an upgrade. Not only are they different in tactical combat, where they will try to stay within melee range of you and really harass your ships and kind of follow you around, rather than act like actual starships and stay in long range and do all kinds of stuff that way. But also, as you pointed out, they actually have the ability to fly around systems now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that can really throw a wrench into your bag of monkeys, because because you'll used to, if like a space eel Bob was sitting around one world, then typically that was a good world, generally speaking, not always, but generally it was. And then you could just sort of pass through that system and keep exploring, because you obviously couldn't fight a space eel Bob that early. But now, even trying to transverse through that system it can be problematic, because they do move around to the different planets in that system, and they will destroy your ships. So I think that's cool, but in terms of tactical combat as a whole in Phase 5, and we will not be able to show tactical combat in this co-op because it's not in there yet, and we're not sure if it will be or not at some point, but it's not right now, so we have to auto-resolve our battles. But tactical combat is very different. Planetary defenses are now in the center of the map instead of being in the back. The old tactic of just having your ships all flanked to the right or left and sort of drawing out the enemy ships and destroying them and then going in to take out planetary defenses, that will no longer work. And the enemy AI is much better at tactical combat. They'll flank, they'll break up their ships, they'll change their formations. The other thing that's super cool is they will hunt down a wounded ship. Like my whole tactic always used to be, oh, my ship in the front's damaged. All right, well, I'll just send him back to go hang out with the troop transports at the other end. I'll just go back there and hang out with them. No. They'll chase them down, and they'll go after your civilian ships. It used to be that they wouldn't do that until combat was basically over. No. They'll go after them now. So, yeah, kudos to the dev team on the improvements to the tactical combat. I like it much better.
I could not agree more, and I'm glad you said kudos, because I think I was just about to say that's the hallmark, I think, of a good developer, where they're slowly knocking out the list of things that you can do to play the system rather than playing the game. And that's a great example of that. So I love the fact that they're working on that from behind the scenes. And speaking of that, as we mentioned, there are so many things to this patch and to these patch notes. So we're not going to have time to talk about all of them, because we want to make sure that we can jump into a discussion of the game settings in a bit, and then go ahead and start with the series before we talk you to death. But the patch notes link is included in the description of the video on my channel, and I'm sure on Mal's as well. So if you want to catch yourself up on what's new, apart from what we've talked about here, you can feel free to do that. Is there anything else big that you wanted to throw in before we...
No, I think the biggest meta changes are the fact that those elements have changed. Growth has changed. And then obviously the traits, which we're going to talk to as we go into the settings and tell you what races we're playing, the trait system's been totally revamped. But with the aggressiveness of the AI, there's value in things that maybe there weren't value in before. And I'll give you an example. The humans have a characteristic called charismatic, so improved negotiations and improved disposition with all other empires. You wouldn't think that that's all that great, but it's pretty damn powerful in Phase 5. And if you're playing by yourself and you want to play on very hard or extreme difficulty, you might want to give the humans a spin as your first time out, or someone that is production focused. Ship construction costs less, or they have an actual straight flat production bonus like the Klakon or maybe the Meklar. Because if you try to play as, say, the Cylon, who is, I think arguably a turtle race, your face will be eaten off.
Yep. Speaking of the Cylon, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but with the Cylon, they have the creative trait as well, which means that whenever they are presented with a tech option where most of us would have to pick a tech, they get everything. I know that the Cylon have always been the creative race, but is that particular advantage new to Early Access 5? I actually haven't played with the Cylon before, so I'm not sure. Yeah,
that they added that in based on feedback. Folks wanted that. It was creative was a very popular trade from Master of Orion II.
So that's a legacy thing.
Yeah, and it does. It gives you all of the techs when you have to make a choice. Now, the flip side of that is some of the races now have uncreative as well. I think it's the Klakon and the Sakra, if memory serves me correctly. And it's just the opposite. You don't get all the techs, and then on a tech level where there's a choice, you randomly get one of the techs. So
that's brutal.
So as example, probably the first choice you make is the difference between Class 1 shields and ECM jammer. If you're creative, you get both. If you're uncreative, you're going to randomly get either Class 1 shields or ECM jammer. So uncreative is a little harsh.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. So again, as we mentioned, we're going to have the links to the patch notes in the descriptions of these videos, so feel free to check those out. But let's go ahead and jump in and talk about how we're going to have this particular campaign set up. I think you and I have agreed that we're going to be playing ourselves as the Terran, and then you have a custom race set up as the humans, right?
Well, yeah, and we were talking a little bit off camera. In our test run, I played the Akari, and they're great mid to late game, but you have to survive long enough to get there. So that means I need to play something that's, complementary to the Terrans. And I thought it might be cool, since this is the extreme Bromance series that we both play, quote unquote, humans, and that I would play a custom race.
We should just call it that. Let's call it the Extreme Bromance series.
The Extreme Bromance series. There you go.
Okay.
But I was gonna do just straight up human, and again, because charismatic is super powerful. And I'm comfortable with the other things that they have, like, diplomat and bonuses to trade agreements and whatnot. I was going to go with them, but then it occurred to me that charismatic's not going to help much, because we're going to meet as quickly as we can, and then we're going to sign an alliance, and then the AI is going to aggressively go after you, and I'm going to get drawn into a war regardless. So that's the only reason, folks, that I'm not just going ahead and playing the human, but I'm going to play a custom race based on the humans. And with that, I'm going to take probably industrialist. So I'll have some bonuses to production, and then we'll have to see, but probably a command point increase, maybe morale. But I'll put that in the description of the video too, like what we both start with, and I'm sure Hadrian will do likewise. But that's the rationale of the custom race, just so you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as far as the AI races, we are going to be playing on a medium galaxy size. And I just want to speak to this very quickly. Mal, you've been very good in your series about making sure that you stick to medium or even smaller. I have not, because I just tend to play the way that I would when I'm playing by myself. And when I'm playing science fiction strategy games where I have control over the size of the map, I always like the idea of a massive universe, because of course the universe is massive. So the ability to feel like you're really exploring tons of worlds and you have access to all this territory is cool. But the way the game currently is, because custom build queues are not in the game yet, I've talked about this extensively in my series, even though it is on the developer's radar and it will be added, from what I understand, in the future. When you get to the mid to late game, if you're playing on a large, or heaven forbid, a huge map, which they added a few patches back, then you just end up doing so much micromanagement every single turn. So we're going to play on a medium-sized map so that there's not as many planets for us to worry about each turn, or for any of us to have, whether we're talking about ourselves or our AI opponents. And speaking of that, within that realm, because it's a medium map, we're going to have 4 opponents. And we picked the Cylon and the Mershon. Cylon because, as you mentioned, they're kind of a turtle race, so that gives a specific type of personality or disposition. Mershon also are known for being really kind of aggressive and catty, no pun intended. And they are going to, kind of provide the counterbalance to that turtle. And then we went with the Meklar and the Silicoid. I'd be lying if I said I completely remembered our rationale for the Meklar, other than the fact that they look and sound cool.
Well, that's the first reason. The second reason is the Meklar and the Silicoid both have the potential to be runaway AIs. So it kind of puts pressure on us, even if we have a comfortable start, even if neither one of the really potentially runaway AIs, the Meklar or Silicoid, are near us. It puts the pressure on us that we better get to them within, say, the first 150 to 200 turns and start putting a hurt on them. Otherwise, they're just going to run off with the game. So I think the rationale, I think, when we were talking about it was, let's put a couple of them in there that force us to keep the pace up. We got to keep pushing. We gotta take worlds. We've got to establish war fronts. Excuse me. And then we've got to really go after them. Otherwise, we're definitely going to lose.
Yeah. That actually sounds like exactly what we talked about, and you just remembered it better than me, so good for you. So those are our actual opponents that we're fighting against. Real quick, let's cover the rest of the minutia of the settings. And of course, you can look at this in our first episode. We'll have the game settings pulled up so you can kind of review it and know what you're watching as you get into the series. But we are playing on a circle galaxy map because, again, playing on certain map types can introduce certain challenges that are not necessarily desirable for Let's Plays. And the AI is still... I think they're still working on the AI's ability to really navigate the red jump lanes that pop up when you play in a spiral map. So when there's there's areas rather of the map that the AI can't access right away, it seems to just still have trouble making those decisions in a very competitive way. It gets kind of stuck. I'm sure they've made improvements. I haven't messed with it too much in Early Access 5 yet, and I know you probably haven't either. But just for safety's sake, and for the sake of having a competitive series, we're going to play on a circle map so that there are none of those red lines, and so that ships, as long as they can find their way to the systems, can get everywhere. So that's going to make things a little bit more interesting.
The other reason, too, is that because we're playing with slow tech, and the reason we're playing with slow tech is because we want the opportunity to really feel like we're advancing. Like if we get, for instance, mass drivers, which are shield piercing, if you have those in the early game and you have slow tech, then that becomes a viable weapon for quite a while. And then the next time you get a big performance increase in terms of weapons, you actually feel it. Whereas if you go with normal or accelerated tech, you blow through all those advancements so quickly. And so I have found through several Let's Plays that playing with slow tech makes for a more interesting playthrough, and it feels like something when you actually do make a breakthrough, which I think it adds to some of the fun value. The other reason is because that multi-state insulator tech that you need to get through those blocked wormholes, or warp lanes.
Yeah, the red lanes.
Yeah, we conceivably we wouldn't be able to get out of our own area for 150 or 200 turns, and that does not seem like fun. So thus the Circle Galaxy. But I think that's it as far as the game settings. Or what else do we have? Random events. We have
random events. We have no pirates. And
no pirates.
What's that again, Mal?
Well, I think we had a very, very deliberate and technical conversation. Well, I think the technical term is because pirates suck. That was it. That was it. It was just that they suck really badly.
It was a very deep, rich, and philosophical discussion, which concluded with we hate them and we're not going to use them. But in all seriousness, because we are playing on extreme difficulty, I think both of us will have our hands full already, and there'll be more than enough to watch regardless of whether they're pirates. So we're going to go without pirates for this series. And then I think the last thing we didn't mention is we are going to go with an average galaxy age, just to keep it, at the mean of what people play with. Some people might play as a young galaxy so that there are fewer, so that there are more like rich worlds that aren't like developed into full biomes yet. Or some might prefer to play on an older galaxy to where there's more threat of supernovas and more instability. But we're going to go with average. And then post-warp, which is the original starting setup for Master of Orion before they added the pre-warp and advanced starts. Pre-warp, of course, can be a lot of fun, but can you comment a little bit more on on why pre-warp can be so interesting, but also sometimes might put the series on rails.
I think for me personally, I really like pre-warp, though I do not play it that way, or I haven't played it that way on the channel much, because there's a lot of build-up. But for me, as somebody that really enjoys the strategy part of it, if you are playing a game and you choose pre-warp, where you have no tech at all, and you got no ships or anything, you can win or lose a 500 turn game in the first 30 turns of decisions that you make. And for me, that the strategist in me is like, oh, I love that. However, I also understand that the bulk of people don't want to see necessarily that decision making. They don't want to watch 2 or 3 episodes of that. So we've decided to go post warp, which means we start with a colony ship and a couple scouts and a frigate and the very, very baseline tech. So that's good. That's fine. I'm fine with it, but that's the rationale why we're going with post warp.
Yeah, and then I think the very last thing we need to mention is we are playing with score victory turned on, which is set to turn 500, so there will be kind of a hard limit. We could potentially go all the way to it, but we might not. Who knows if we're fortunate enough to go on a rampage and finish up the series before 500. But that way there's not a feeling that anyone is watching, or that we, for that matter, are playing something that is just unending. That would necessarily be the worst thing in the world.
And if either one of us, quote unquote, wins, right, then it's a win, right? So if we happen to get the Conquest victory, which I think the only way would be is if like one of us surrendered to the other. But in any case, we might get to a point where we just clearly have the win, and we're going to say, look, we've got the win, So hopefully you guys understand that.
Yeah. I've had to do that with at least one of my series in Master of Orion, as it is an early access game. So I think that is everything. You ready to jump into the series, bud?
I am. I hope that you enjoyed our discussion about Phase 5, and I hope that you join us for the Bromance series. Hadrian's got some other information. You want to take us out here, Hadrian?
Sure thing. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed this, don't forget that Mal and I are both going to have a series going, so you can watch the campaign from both sides if you're into that, or you can pick which perspective you prefer. Don't forget to like the videos and subscribe to follow along if you're not already. We're going to be uploading new episodes in Extreme Bromance on both channels every day at 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is GMT -4, again, for those of you not in the States. Comments are always welcome, too. We both very much welcome discussion and feedback on how the series is going and would love to hear from you, so let us know what you think.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. He's Hadrian, I'm Mal, and we will see you later.